Okay, here we go. Stand by. 3, 2, 1, action.
Assume nothing.
Brash, bald-faced blasphemy.
Question everything.
I find it extremely hard to imagine.
Open your eyes.
It is quite all right to be an atheist.
The fastest growing group of people in the country has been measured as being those who have no belief or who are atheists.
You don't have to be apologetic or quiet about it.
Challenge the opposition.
You see religion on 100 fronts losing the argument.
And start thinking. This is The Thinking Atheist Worldwide.
Tonight's broadcast is brought to you by Free Flow 2015. The Free Thought Florida Conference is on the books. It's coming up November 6th, 7th, and 8th in Orlando, Florida. And an amazing lineup of speakers. Dan Barker is going to be the keynote this year. He's hot off the release of his new book called Life-Driven Purpose. David Tamayo is going to be there, Sarah Moorhead from Recovering from Religion, Matt Dillahunty, Catherine Stewart, who wrote the book The Good News Club, will be there, Dr. Ryan Cragen. I'll be speaking on Saturday morning, a huge weekend, and discounted tickets if you get them before World Humanist Day, which is June the 21st. They're offering kind of a discount for you. So get your advance tickets, save a few bucks. It's a great deal any way you slice it. It's Free Thought Florida. It's coming up November 6th through the 8th. Just log on to free-flow.org to find out more. free-flow.org. Just got back from an eventful weekend in San Francisco, California. By the way, huge thanks out to the Atheist Advocates of San Francisco for hosting me on Saturday. I showed up late. I was disheveled. I was just all over the place. And the reason was, right before the event, my rental car had been bashed into. Someone had broken out the back passenger window, and my laptop had been stolen. The laptop containing the presentation I was doing for the Atheist Advocates of San Francisco. Here's the story. Here's the short version. Is that I was in San Francisco to do the event, but the larger reason I was there with my family is that we have a dear friend who discovered he had a brain tumor, about a lemon-sized tumor in his brain. And he went through surgery. He's been going through something called cyberknife. And his prognosis was just really up in the air. We really didn't know what to expect. And so we wanted to sort of spend some time at his side. We wanted to go and see him and spend time with him and give him some encouragement and just hang out. Maybe we got him in a wheelchair. We got him out on the pier. We took him down to Pier 39 and, we went out and had dinner and swapped stories, made some memories, just breathed the free air because the guy's been going into rehab. He's been doing all this other stuff, occupational therapy. He's been holed up in this room for most of this recovery process. And so we wanted to spend a few days with him. And while I was in San Francisco, I scheduled a tour stop. So we pulled up to the building where he and his mom were renting, the condo they were renting or whatever you call it. And we parked legally right there on the street, and we went up the elevator to go say hi and give hugs and then find out where long-term parking is. And I left in behind the hatch of the SUV our luggage and my laptop backpack. It had my laptop in it and a little Tascam audio recorder. And we were up there not long at all. We just went up, said hi, hey, where do we park? We went back down, and there's a shattered window, and my laptop is gone. I've carried that thing across the country and internationally for about 2.5 years. We've been coast to coast to coast to coast, been to Canada many times, took it to Australia. And, there's some atheist PowerPoints on there and some production software. And yes, I did have security and backups in place. Yes. Because it's by the time I get through the insurance deductible and everything else, I'm just going to end up buying a new piece of gear. So anyway, I'm all worked up and frazzled and whatnot. And I posted a photograph of the broken rental car window online, along with kind of a short rant. And people began to volley opinions as to who was to blame. Well, look, I understand. I should have taken the extra few seconds and popped the hatch and grabbed the laptop. I get it. I got in a hurry. I wasn't thinking. I blew it. I wasn't vigilant. I made a mistake in that regard. But was it my fault? Did I, quote unquote, have it coming. This is what a few people online said, and this unleashed the shitstorm of debate, frothing debate on Facebook. Who's at fault? Seth, you're at fault. You should have been smarter than that. You should have had your head on your shoulders. What's wrong with you? No, it's not Seth's fault. His property was in a locked vehicle that he rented legally. Someone smashed in and illegally stole his property. The thief is at fault. And somebody else says, no, society is at fault. Because we live in a world where people feel they must steal in order to get the things that they need. I probably helped to call down the thunder when I asserted online that I think some people do live their lives in a parasitic way. You know, they would rather leech off of someone else than build and create for themselves, and they would rather excuse why they aren't accomplishing anything instead of actually going out and attempting to accomplish anything. Now, the second I say that, a lot of quote-unquote people who call themselves, many of them call themselves enlightened thinkers or progressives or what have you, flip out and say it's society's fault, and they go into this long diatribe about how I'm a cruel and uncompassionate person. And if you know me, you know that's not the case. You know, I really am convinced that we shouldn't be just atheists, but we should be humanist. I am convinced that many people are in situations where they genuinely do need help, whether it's from us as individuals, from a private entity, from a government program. They need help, and we need to give it to them. They're genuinely wanting to better themselves, and they just need a break. They need a helping hand, and I'm all about those people. But I'll tell you, you are kidding yourself if you don't think that there are people in every walk of life, and honestly, at almost every income level, who wouldn't rather take than give, who wouldn't rather leech off of someone else than go out and break ground and create and invent and take risks and do things for themselves. Okay? When I think about my laptop, yeah, it's a piece of equipment. It's a piece of gear. But I think about what it represents. To think about the level of commitment and time and effort and sacrifice and work that goes into the things that we do, whether it's an endeavor like this that I'm passionate about, or whether it's someone building a business or doing something else, right? How much of themselves they have put on the line to see this stuff happen. And somebody else just waltzes along with a tire iron to smash the window and just steal a piece of it. I'm not quick to excuse that. No, I'm not. I don't automatically think, it's the starving little girl in the bread line. No, I don't automatically think that. I'm convinced there are some people who just think, hey, screw it. Why would I go out and create something for myself? Why would I develop myself? Why would I want to do or be anything when I can sit on my ass and let somebody else do all the heavy lifting, and then I can walk by, smash a window, and look, I got something for free. I don't have a lot of compassion for those people. And already, there's a section of people in a comment section right now who are just frothing at the mouth about how uncompassionate I am for the downtrodden, right? They're already standing over on this soapbox, not even listening to what I'm saying. I'm not talking about the people who genuinely do want to better themselves. I'm not talking about them. I'm talking about people that you and I bump into all the time, who will never really know what it's like to create something. They're content to just latch on to the successes, the hard work, the sacrifices, the risks, the toil, the pain, the money that somebody else does. They'll just latch right on and have a nice ride. And I have a suspicion that whoever has the laptop right now is probably one of those people. Do I personally at this moment feel a sense of sympathy that society did them wrong? Not so much. But it might make for an interesting broadcast. So we'll see what happens in a few days. Anyway, at the end of the day, the most important thing is that my family wasn't in the car when the robbery took place. Everybody's safe. That's the most important thing to me. Stuff can be replaced. It's a pain in the ass. I got to go find a laptop before I do the event in Seattle and Vancouver next weekend. But at the same time, I think, everybody's safe, everybody's good. Those are the most precious commodities in my life. Gear can be replaced. But it was an interesting weekend in San Francisco, to be sure, and it has sparked some interesting conversation. Have I ever told you the story about the day that I lost my job? I mentioned in the book I was terminated from a Christian radio job after a fight with a boss. I think this was 1999 or 2000, something like that. And I also say fairly, I think, that I was probably justifiably terminated. I probably had it coming. But have I ever told you that story, the specific details of that day? Of course, the theme of the broadcast today is change. That day marks one of the most significant changes in my life, probably outside of my apostasy, maybe the most significant change of my life. I'm trying to really see it in perspective. Change is the universal constant, that kind of thing. The one thing you can always count on is change. My stepdaughter just graduated from high school. It was like 1,500 students in the class. It took them forever to read all the names. She goes to this great big public high school. I went to a private Christian school when I was a senior. There were 20 students in my senior class. 20 students. That was a very short processional. But it was a very cool ceremony. They didn't even have a keynote, which I think is a brilliant idea. I mean, stop and think about your high school graduation. Maybe even your college graduation. Do you remember who the keynote was? Do you care who the keynote was? The graduation ceremony had, the typical student leaders who were standing up and saying all the things that we have heard at other graduation ceremonies. And it's so weird hearing these quote-unquote words of wisdom come out of the mouths of babes, what I consider to be babes, right? Pursue your dream, be true to yourself, never give up. These types of phrases are always said by these eager, smiling young faces from the podium, and I'm glad they are. I think they're good sentiments to have, Be true to yourself, live your dream, pursue your goals. Don't be discouraged, or don't let discouragement cause you to quit. Never quit. Quitters never win. It was a lot of that kind of stuff from student leaders. And there would have been more of it from a keynote, right? There would have been more of it if they'd have brought somebody else in, and he would have spent 20, 30 minutes while everybody's checking their watches, going, wah, 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 wah. No one would have even heard a word that he said. So they didn't even bother with that. They just had kind of these punctuated moments in a relatively short ceremony before they called out 1,500 names. And I watched her go up and receive her diploma and become a high school graduate. And I think about my own life when I was that age, and I think, I'd like to go back in time and I'd like to have a conversation with myself. And I don't even know if I would be listening. I mean, the Seth of 1986 I had the world by the tail, right? I had the answers. I was a little too comfortable in my own skin. I had been raised in a religious cocoon. I mean, I had the answer with a capital A. I had the truth with a capital T. No need to go out and ask all these questions. I already have the answer. I was on stage as a student, as a representative for Youth for Christ, and I'm out there giving adults my wisdom. What wisdom did I have at that point in my life? I hadn't even barely left the States. I'd never traveled abroad. I'd never genuinely studied other philosophies or theologies. I hadn't really done my homework on life. But I was eager and a fresh young face, and I was well-spoken, and hey, let's use him. He'll be great. What a wonderful representative of our generation. He's going to accomplish amazing things. So I'm student council president, I'm student leader. I was the kind of guy that parents would have loved their daughter to bring home. I was pretty boring, but I was safe. I was clean cut. I played the piano. You know what I'm saying? Isn't a nice young man? Such a wonderful young man he is. Just such a good servant of Jesus. And I was pretty cocky. I felt like a confident, cocky. I just felt like, yeah, man, I've got it together. And everything was pretty cut and dry for me, Married at the age of 22, not to make this too personal a show, but I'm talking about change. If I'm going to speak about change, I need to probably address the biggest changes in my own life. But it's funny, I'm 22 years old, and I'm standing in a church at the altar, and I'm saying the vows, In Christian churches, you're not simply being married by a pastor to each other. You are actually being supervised by God, right? That's why you're in the church. Marriage is a spiritual bond as much or more than it is a physical bonding of earthly lives. You are now committing yourselves, if not eternally, for the rest of your mortal life to each other, and you're doing so at a spiritual level. And so this is your quote-unquote marriage. You are now married. You have found your soulmate, your soul ties, or what some churches like to say, you have a soul tie to this other person. And so you stand before man and God, and you say your vows, till death do us part. And when you're young and idealistic and you don't realize the nature of change, and you don't realize how messy life can become, and you don't realize that you might be very much a different person in 20 years, and so might your spouse. You don't realize how things change, life changes. You don't get it. You don't see that big picture yet. You say eagerly, yes, till death do us part. In my culture, divorce is rather stigmatized. This part of the country, it happens everywhere, and yet in some families, it's still like the thing that should not be named. I think in the minds of many believers, your first marriage is the legitimate marriage, right? It's the first bond that you made. It is a physical tie. It is a spiritual tie. It is the tie that binds. And if that tie is broken through divorce and you remarry, in many ways, I think they see the next marriage as illegitimate. Well, actually, they're divorced and remarried. It becomes that kind of thing, very judgmental culture. And I think in some ways they see that as a betrayal of what God had planned for you. Now, add some apostasy into that soup, and people are really beginning to whisper to themselves, well, he's a divorcee, he's remarried, and he's an atheist. If you'd have gone back to my 22-year-old self standing in that church, making a vow to man and to God, who had just started his Christian radio career, and you had told him how much his life would change, he would probably say, you're out of your mind, or he would think you were the devil himself, the devil, the father of lies, who would come to steal, kill, and destroy. Remember, I started my Christian radio career, I think I was 21. Man, I felt good about myself. I'm on the radio when I'm playing Jesus music. I'm a broadcaster when I speak hundreds. We didn't exactly have thousands at the beginning of my career. Hundreds, maybe 1,000 people were hearing the sound of my voice, and I was being an influence, blah, blah, blah. My parents were so hugely proud, you should have seen their faces. When we talked about Seth's on the radio for KXOJ playing contemporary Christian music, he's out there, quote-unquote, ministering for Jesus. We're so proud of our son. They would have relatives turn on the radio when they visited town, probably drove them crazy. KXOJ at that point was the number 2 radio station in the entire city in our target audience of adult females. We were having huge success. Jim and I were on the morning show. And there were cardboard cutouts of us made for some radio promotion that we were doing. And they were all over town. You'd go into retail outlets and you would see Jim and I would have, effigies of ourselves in cardboard. Life-size cardboard cutouts would be placed in these stores all over town. My parents were so freaking proud. They couldn't. Our son there's a cardboard cutout of our son over here at Mardell retail Christian bookstore. And there's one over here at Nelson Nissan Mazda, the car dealership. And there's one over here at so-and-so. Oh my goodness, it's just so amazing. He's doing what God created him to do, a natural storyteller, a broadcaster, communicator, and minister of the gospel, right? And I was feeling pretty good about myself as well. I did not see the changes coming. I did not see that my entire life at the age of 47 would look so much different than it did at 27. Back then, I had all the answers. Right now, I just have a shit ton of questions. Back then, I feel like I knew everything. Now I'm only knowledgeable about how ignorant I am. Back then, there was a lot of fear of being wrong, fear of the unknown, and safety and security inside the walls. Now I find myself much less afraid of the things that I do not understand, and more than anything, curious and having a desire to understand. So there I am on the radio, a successful Christian broadcaster, feeling pretty good about myself. Still pretty young, still very wet behind the ears, still insulated, living in a culture where everybody agrees with me. I didn't know any non-believers, not really. I didn't think I even knew any Catholics. You know what I'm saying? Everybody was just either Baptist or Assembly of God. I think that was about it. Couple of Methodists. God, I think about how little I understood, how little I'd been exposed to anything and everything, and it's embarrassing. It's just embarrassing. But over time, 10 years of doing the job of radio, it's difficult to describe to people who don't see the machine of broadcasting from the inside. Many people who seek to get a job in corporate radio, FM radio specifically, they think, hey, you go on the radio, you tell some jokes, you play some songs, everybody goes home with a paycheck. It's awesome. It's the greatest job in the world. And in many ways, it is the greatest job in the world. And in many other ways, it is a pressure cooker. It is a burnout machine. It is a sort of a corporate rubber stamp. There are so many things that go on behind the scenes. It makes broadcasting a very difficult business to be in long term. I mean, every day you go on the radio and you are charged to be funny and to be entertaining and to be relevant and to be prepared and to be better than the person over here who is desperate to have you fired and get your job. You've got consultants who are peeking their heads in the doors. Quite often the consultants have never done radio in their lives, but their job is to listen to your show and then come and tell you how to be a better host, right? Those who can't teach. You have air check sessions. These are a real joy. What happens is that your program directors will record at random a morning show, usually one that went horribly wrong because they do happen, and then they pull you into an office and they play you what you just did and tell you why it sucked and why you should fix it. And your show is rated by a ratings company, and they have these organizations. And I don't know how they do it now, but how they used to do it was just laughable. Here's how they determined who was listening to your show. They would send out these paper diaries, these blank diaries. They'd just scatter them all over town via mail. And they would ask people for a period of, I think it was a week, maybe 10 days, to write down every radio station that they listened to during the day and for how long. And then when you're done, you put it back in this envelope and you mail it back in. Now think about how most people listen to the radio. They're in the car, they've got 5-7 presets, they're mashing buttons till they hear something they want to listen to, right? Oh, that's a cool song, we'll leave it here. Oh, here's the news, we'll go here. Oh, the severe weather, I'll go here. Now, are they stopping to think about the call letters and the frequencies of the stations they're on as much? No, most people listen hugely casually. They're just looking for something to listen to. You think they're going to remember? Oh, I listened to K-Hits for 12 minutes at 7:30 on Wednesday. That kind of thing. You think they're going to do that for a week? And so these diaries go back into these major ratings companies. These major ratings companies sell these ratings books, which radio stations pay for, and then they use that data to determine whether or not you should keep your job. Seth, the ratings are down this quarter. May have to make some changes, that kind of thing. Oh, it's bloody. It's just a bloody, bloody business. Most people on the radio are not even really given much of an opportunity to be creative, to be storytellers. It's mostly just liner reading anyway. I mean, think about the kind of radio you hear, especially on pop music radio, you know? Q97 FM, the radio station that plays the most music for the workday, 50 minutes of music every single hour. Don't forget to be listening to the Mike and Mark and Mandy morning show tomorrow morning at 7:20, the secret song of the day. When you hear that song, make a note of it mentally because we'll play it again between 8 and 5. When you hear it, be the 97th caller at 460-9797. You could win a brand new 2016 Dodge Charger or a Chick-fil-A sandwich. That's tomorrow morning, Q97 FM. Right? I mean, that's essentially what we're doing. And you are instantly replaceable because there's 1,000 other guys who could do your job just as well as you could. Forgive the digression. Something I'm passionate about. But when I was in radio and successful, I had no idea that just a few years later, I wouldn't just be unemployed with this company, but I would be in an entirely different field of production. I had no idea that change was coming. 1997, 1998-ish, I started to find the change in my own heart regarding what I thought, what I was convinced of in regard to my belief in God and the Bible and Jesus. I began to become more skeptical, more cynical. I was burned out, show after show after show after concert after concert, after live broadcast, after meeting, after ratings book, after show, after show, after show, every single day. I'm telling you, it's not really an easy business to do in that way long term. It's hard to keep yourself, your mind, your heart in the game. And anybody who's done some kind of a job like that knows exactly what I'm talking about. And over the years, the station manager and I we'd had our share of conflict. We're both type A doer personalities. We're both very confrontation-oriented. We were both passionate about what we thought and why we thought it. We both thought we were right. And over the course of years and years, we had had more than our share of encounters. Now, here I am, a successful morning show host. I mean, we were on top of the world. In fact, KXOJ at that time, and it may still be the case, was one of the most successful Christian radio stations in the United States. Okay? And I don't remember what the argument was over. I don't remember what sparked it. It was some trivial thing, which is quite often how these things happen. I don't know if I've communicated with you the idea of the 6% event. Have you heard me talk about this before? If you're not familiar with the idea, very quickly, here's what I mean by a 6% event. It's something that I had heard presented by a guy years and years and years ago, and I thought this makes perfect sense to me. Let's say that you are a race car and you got a gauge from 0 to 100. This is your temperature, right? 0, you're totally at peace, you're totally relaxed, you're totally happy. 100, you are in the red and the engine blows. Okay? You lose your temper, you pop, you snap at 100. Well, if you are at peace, you're at 0, and something inconvenient happens or something irritating happens. Let's say you get a tax bill you didn't expect. You have a fight with your spouse, or your car breaks down, or your kid does something that drives you crazy, or somebody smashes something in the kitchen, or the lawnmower won't start, or I don't know, whatever. Let's call these 5, maybe 10% events. I'm at 0. And the lawnmower doesn't start, and it's going to rain in a couple hours. I need to get the lawn mowed. Well, that irritates me, and so now I'm at 10%, 15% maybe. And, the tax bill comes. Oh, shit, what's this about? How much is this going to cost me? That's another 20, 25%. And let's say somebody breaks a dish and, freaks me out. I'm like, oh, what's going on in there? Well, let's say even after all that, I'm at 45, 50%, whatever. I'm still not close to blowing my stack, right? But let's say that over the course of the day, a bunch of small things had added up. The mower won't start, the tax bill comes, you have a fight with your spouse, something horrible happens your office, some things go on that irritate you until you get to the point where you're at 95 on the gauge. You're at 95%. You are teed up. You are already pretty hot. And then all it takes is a 6% event to get you from 95 to well over 100. You're at a 101 and you've blown. The engine's blown. Your temper's blown. You are raging, okay? Well, that's, I think, essentially what happened to us. Station manager and I had kind of pushed each other to the point where we were both pretty much in the red. These small events had added up to where we were both at 95, and all it took was one encounter, one conversation, one thing, one disagreement, and boom, there was an explosion. And he was so pissed. I mean, I think we were arguing about something on a program log, and I said something that, no, I disagree. I think that's wrong. And I smarted off, and he just popped. And he actually kicked me out of the office. Get out of my office. Get out of here, you know. So I left the station early that day. And the truth is I disrespected him. I mean, I look at it now after the dust is settled, and yeah, I was part of the problem. I wasn't the whole problem. You know, I still stand by a lot of the things that were said, a lot of the things that I did, a lot of the stands I took. I still stand by them. But I also know that I was not always the best employee and that I had disrespected my employer. I see it now in a broader light, and I understand, you know, he probably had justification to release me. I was a cocky, insulated, burned out employee of 10 years who, you know, I was the fly in the ointment, man. And so that afternoon, after he kicked me out of the office, I had this thought. I thought, you know, I might lose my job over this. Yeah, I might get fired. I thought about it some more and thought, well, what can you do? You know, what can you do about it? So I went in the following morning to do the morning show, and Jim and I did the show, 6 a.m. to 10 a.m., just like always. And I went back to my office to show prep for the following day, do some paperwork or whatever. It's probably about 10:15. You know, the show had just barely ended. And the program director came up to my door and he said, "Hey, Seth, you got a minute?" And those who have been through a scenario like this know what's coming. You know, "Hey, Seth, you got a minute?" You might as well have been wearing a Grim Reaper costume. Holding the sickle, you know. "Seth, you have a minute?" Yep, I got a minute. It's like I'm going to have a whole lot more minutes than just a few, you know. So we walk down the long hallways, like the long walk, right? And we go to the boss's corner office, and I see that the program director takes his position, the station owner is there, and then the station manager. And there's an empty chair. Guess who that's for? And I go and I sit down. I don't say a word. I mean, I'm just stoic. I'm not sure if I was overwhelmed or I knew it wouldn't do any good or why. I don't think I said a word the entire meeting. I think I just nodded. And he didn't say a whole lot, but he did say, "This your last day. You are being terminated." And he handed me an envelope, which was a severance check. It wasn't much. This thing is like 4 weeks, maybe. I'd been there 10 years. And I'd given a lot to that radio station. I bled into that station. I really did. I helped build that freaking morning show. And so that kind of stung. Oh, thanks. Thanks for those, thanks for those 4 weeks. But it's better than nothing. He could have just kicked me to the curb, said, "Piss off," And I went back to my office, and I had this cart that I'd taken out of the storage room and some boxes, and I just started disassembling where I had been for so many years. I just started taking it apart. And that's a sobering moment too, Pictures of my family over here, put that up, and I've got all these little knickknacks and tchotchkes. Radio, you always get tons of toys, and everybody All the record companies are sending you this funky promotional stuff, and you'll keep some. All those go in a box. And then I've got this kind of wall of fame that I'd put together with photographs that I had taken with Christian artists over the years. It's kind of a this is your life thing. I had, hey, here's me with Jackie Velasquez, and here's me being photographed with Stephen Curtis Chapman, and here's me with the Newsboys as we go around in that boat, the Statue of Liberty, on the Love Liberty Disco Tour, and here's Jim and I as we pose with so-and-so at the Dove Awards in Nashville, Tennessee, and here's so-and-so at a promotion, and here's so-and-so, and here's so-and-so, and just artist after artist after artist. I had this huge wall of them. I take it down. One by one, all the pieces go in the box, and the reality of it really begins to hit me. I am losing my job. I'm losing my livelihood. I have a mortgage, I have a family, I have obligations, and I have no job. And I walked out with my cart. I'm pushing this cart out through the lobby. The receptionist is crying. I'm pretty rattled myself, and I can see there's a series of glass doors. There's a door that looks into the office itself, into the entire sort of complex. And then there's a second door that is glass that you can see into the conference room. And I can actually see all the way back into the conference room that the management had brought the entire staff together and was making the announcement that KXOJ's morning host had been fired. KXOJ would be moving on without him. Yeah, I knew that's exactly what was going on. And threw everything in the car, and I drove home. And I was devastated. No, I'd been burned out. Yeah, I'd been having my doubts. Yeah. But still, this had been part of my DNA for a decade. Been part of what I was about. It was the skill that I knew. Now what? Now what am I going to do? What am I going to do with my life? I am not prepared for this change that has come. And I didn't sleep at all, Ended up in corporate radio for a few years, until ultimately I made my break in 2004. Radio being a shrinking business, largely computers these days, I decided I wanted to be more necessary, not less, as I got older, so I segued from audio into video production. I took a job with a local video production house in 2004. And I'll tell you, that day in 2004, when I left radio, I was at Clear Channel Radio. I turned my 2 weeks notice in. I worked my 2 weeks. On that final day, I go back to HR and I turn in my key and I sign the final documents. I had this conversation in my mind. Talk about change. I will never be a radio host again for the rest of my life. This season of my life has passed. This is it. This chapter is over. And it was the right move at the right time, but still a sobering moment. This is, talk about change. And I grieved a little bit because despite the corporate machine, despite the repetition, despite the competition, despite the burnout, it was still something that I dearly, 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 dearly loved. And I thought, I'll never have this again. I'm going to be a different kind of storyteller now. I'm going to have a video camera instead of a radio microphone. Having no idea that something like radio podcasting would one day exist. I had no idea that this was even possible. I hadn't even heard of radio podcasting until 2010. And it has liberated me. I mean, think about the nature of shows like this. In the corporate world, quite often, you are on this strictly regimented clock. You can talk for 90 seconds, play 2 songs, commercial break, jingle out, play 2 songs, news, weather, talk 90 seconds, 2 songs, right? Even on talk radio, once you get into an interview or discussion, you're going 6, 7, maybe 10 minutes before you have to stop and do what we call a commercial stop set. They'll play 5, 6, 8 commercial units and then come back and do another few minutes of an interview and then take another commercial break. The entire format is just, it's all a momentum killer. I mean, the idea that you and I can have a show where we talk about whatever for as long as we want is just amazing. And it explains why corporate AM/FM radio is bleeding to death. Because now anybody and everybody can do radio on their terms. They can listen to radio on their own terms. And they have real control over the kind of radio they want to populate their lives with. We're up to show number, 223? 223 different broadcasts where we got a chance to just take as long as we need. If you need 15 minutes to talk about the Church of Scientology, we take that. If it takes 2 hours and 15 minutes, we take it. If we're going to explore this and it's best with one interview, we do that. If it takes 4, we do that. We want to toss the rules out the window and just do whatever we want to do, talk about whatever we want to talk about, we do that. It's a kind of freedom that never before existed for broadcasters. And so here I am 11 years after I supposedly left radio as a career, and I am doing radio as a career. And the reason I say that as a career is because on June the 19th, I will be losing my job as a video producer, a job that's been slowly phasing down. Big change coming, It's a hard culture for professional video producers in one capacity. Video production used to be a pretty exclusive gig. The equipment, the cameras cost a lot of money. The software cost a lot of money. The good stuff, it cost a lot of money to do what we do. And now, people are shooting high-definition video on their cell phones, for Pete's sake. I think this little Samsung I've got shoots 3K. I think that's right. I haven't tried it yet. You can buy a handheld Tascam audio recorder for about $99, and it's awesome. Hell, I got one myself. I take it on the road to conventions. You can get professional software from companies like Adobe for just a few bucks a month, And so it has made video production in a professional capacity. It sort of changed that landscape. I think it's a necessary change. I'm not one of those people who thinks we shouldn't evolve. I think it's a necessary change. I'm glad to see the tools for storytelling in the hands of more and more and more and more people. Now, I will give the caveat that just because somebody owns a camera and owns software does not mean they know what the hell they're doing. The analogy I always give is, I own Microsoft Word. Can I write a bestseller? I have a toolbox. Can I build a house? Right? There's a lot more to it than just having gear, which is, I think, a lesson I tried to convey in my video about Joshua Feuerstein when he was asking his people for $20,000 for a Red 1 video camera to be able to post videos on YouTube. I just think to myself, you got to be shitting me. It's the carpenter as much or more than the tools. But I'm glad to see more and more people who have access to the tools because there are, I think, a lot of great storytellers out there who never before really had a shot. Now, the downside to this scenario is that many companies, like the one that I work for, have found that they are less and less in demand in this particular market. And over the years, I think I mentioned 3 years ago that we were looking at some big changes, what was going to happen. I didn't know what my role would be with the company, if any. And it has scaled down and scaled back and scaled down and scaled back. My role with the company has scaled back along with it. I used to make a pretty good living. And at this measure, I'm essentially kind of a part-time employee. And it's kind of a planned change. I've always wanted to be able to do what I do for the Thinking Atheist, the radio show, the video production, the activism, this kind of thing. Being a communicator for this particular reason has always been something I wanted to be able to commit myself to full time. And again, this change is not entirely unexpected, but it's still sobering. It's still a little bit scary because now I will be absolutely working without a net. And I think this is an amazing thing. It's, what is that saying that says you should do something that scares you several times in your life? If you never do anything that scares you, it means you've never really taken a risk. You've never been challenged. You've never broken new ground. You've never really done anything or been anywhere. You have to, throughout different points of your life, do something that scares you. And while this is exhilarating and welcome and wonderful, yeah, it's a little bit scary. Now, I have made a commitment to the Thinking Atheist, and I'm holding to that commitment with just every fiber of my being, and it hasn't always been easy, especially now that I'm going to be a full-time radio host and this is my livelihood. But I'm a one sponsor per show kind of host. One sponsor per broadcast. You know, you listen to AM, FM radio, and you might hear 10, 15 commercial units an hour, and everything is sponsored, and I just find that often tedious. I don't want that for us. I want to be able to, have the show supported, to be able to have that symbiotic relationship with a sponsor that I genuinely like. And if you hear them on the radio, on The Thinking Atheist, it's because I checked them out, I use them, and I genuinely do like them. You should see the list of sponsors that I have rejected. Not even necessarily because they were bad companies or bad sponsors, but they were either a poor fit for me, they were a poor fit for you, or we already had the single sponsor in place and there was simply no room. And that'll flat out test you. Because essentially you're saying, no thanks, please keep your money, right? And when you realize that this is it, this is your job, this is how you pay the mortgage, this is how you provide for your family, it's a little bit harder to say no. But I just don't want this show to become that. And so it's one sponsor per broadcast, period. I think it must drive the people at Blog Talk Radio nuts. And I know that many of our listeners appreciate the kind of the hard stand that I've taken on this issue. And they appreciate the fact that we aren't loaded and littered with commercials, and they have helped to pick up the slack by being supporters, whether it's through donations or on Patreon. And I would like to make that opportunity available to you. And when we think about, we subscribe to things that bring benefit to our lives all the time. Whether you're subscribing to an internet radio station that plays music, or whether you're subscribing to Sirius XM, or whether you're subscribing to a service like NatureBox, right? You subscribe and they deliver something to your door. Well, this radio show is delivered to you every single week. Does it bring benefit to your life? Do you enjoy what you hear? Do you find encouragement in it? Do you think it's an important conversation to have? Are you entertained? Do you laugh? Do you cry? Those types of things. Is it something you would miss if it was gone? If that's the case, you can support it in its current form, allowing me to keep that one sponsor per show model by becoming a supporter online. And you can choose how you want to support it. You can go to thethinkingatheist.com, and there's a button at the top of the screen that says contribute. And you can decide if you want to do like a one-time donation or you want to become a patron, which means that you give a few cents whenever a broadcast goes up or a video goes up, and you can then set a cap or limit so that you only give up to a certain amount and you're never surprised. You control the horizontal, you control the vertical, you can control the terms of how you support the show, but you are a supporter, you are a patron, you are somebody who helps me maintain sort of the format and the integrity of this show and to provide for my family as your full-time radio host. I am thinking about doing like maybe an after show, an occasional after show just for the Patreon supporters. Something that includes video, maybe a Google Hangout kind of thing. I'm not really sure exactly what that's going to look like. I'm still putting the idea together, but I am going to make an effort once or twice a month to do something extra for the patrons, where we just kind of hang out. It'll be very casual, very loose. We're not going to constrain ourselves even to the topics of religion. We can talk about whatever, and people can dial in and we can just have that. And I'm still working on what that is or isn't going to be. But I will put together something just for those who've been so kind to support the broadcast. A big change. And I think a change I'm thankful for, because this is what I'm passionate about. It's what I love. It's what I want to be a part of. This is the conversation that I am most interested in having. I want a less superstitious world tomorrow than we have today. I want to encourage people that it's okay to be themselves instead of the people that their parents or their cultures or their parishes or their religious elders tell them they have to be. I want to promote curiosity. I want to join my friends in discovering the world every single day. I want to have some laughs. I want to tell stories. I want to have fun. I want to learn stuff. And I think this show is an important part of having that in my life, and I certainly hope it is part of that in your own life. And if you're facing change in your own circle, it is my hope for you that whether it's an easy change or a difficult one, whether it's expected or unexpected, that when the dust settles, that you will find yourself in a much better place, a place where you know more about yourself, where you're doing more of what you love, and you're doing it with the people you care the most about. Thank you so much for listening. Thank you so much for supporting. Thank you so much for just helping to spread the word. Thanks for making us the #1 radio station on Blog Talk Radio. It would not happen. None of this would happen without you, and you are greatly, greatly appreciated. I will see you next week on the Thinking Atheist Radio Podcast. Take care.
Follow The Thinking Atheist on Facebook and Twitter. Watch dozens of original videos on the Thinking Atheist YouTube channel. And visit our website for resources, links, contact information, the editor's blog, and more. thethinkingatheist.com.